Today's story is about trust, betrayal, and finding strength when the person you love most leaves you when you need them the most. Let's dive in. A man's character is revealed not by what he does when he's strong, but by how he treats others when they're weak. My grandmother used to say that, and I never really understood it until I found myself flat on my back in a hospital bed, looking up at the woman I'd loved for 33 years as she told me she wasn't going to waste the rest of her life taking care of a useless cripple. That's when I learned that some people only love you when you're useful to them. And sometimes the person who breaks your heart the deepest is the one who promised to love you through everything. The fluorescent lights in that hospital room buzzed like angry wasps. I remember that sound more than anything else from that day. Not the beeping machines, not the smell of disinfectant, not even the feeling of absolute nothing from my waist down. Just that damn buzzing. Like the lights were as irritated as I was, about to become. Jennifer stood at the foot of my bed, her arms crossed, looking at me like I was a problem she needed to solve. Not her husband of 33 years, not the man who'd worked double shifts to put her through nursing school, not the father of her 2 children or the grandfather who just finished building a treehouse for our grandson, Tyler. Just a problem. The doctor says you'll never walk again, she said, and her voice was flat, emotionless, like she was reading the weather report. I nodded. I already knew. The forklift had crushed 3 vertebrae in my lower back, and even with the morphine, I could feel my life splitting into 2 parts, before the accident and everything that came after. I want you to know something, Rayful, she continued, and I swear that buzzing got louder. I didn't sign up for this. I married a man, not a patient. I'm 58 years old, and I'm not going to spend whatever years I have left changing your diapers and pushing you around in a wheelchair. The words hit me harder than that 2-ton forklift ever did. If you've ever been blindsided by someone you trusted, hit subscribe and drop your city in the comments. Where you watching from? Let's see where our brotherhood stretches. Because what I'm about to tell you, it might save you from making the same mistakes I did. I was born in 1948 in Montgomery, Alabama, the second of 4 boys to Samuel and Ruth Winston. My daddy worked at the steel mill, and my mama cleaned houses for white families on the other side of town. We didn't have much, but we had each other, and in those days, that felt like everything. Our house was a shotgun shack with thin walls and thinner wallets, but mama made it feel like a palace. She could take a chicken, some rice, and whatever vegetables were growing in our little backyard garden and turn it into a feast that would have the whole neighborhood smelling what we were cooking. Sunday mornings, she'd fry up some fat back and make biscuits so fluffy they could float to heaven. And Daddy would sit at the head of our little table reading scripture while the 4 of us boys tried to sit still long enough to get fed. Boys, Mama would say, pointing that wooden spoon at us like a weapon, you remember this: a man's word is his bond, and his family is his treasure. You treat both with respect, you hear me? Yes, ma'am, we'd chorus back, and she'd nod, satisfied that she'd planted some wisdom in our thick skulls for another day. Daddy was a quiet man, but when he spoke, we listened. He had these huge hands, scarred and calloused from years of working with hot metal, but gentle enough to braid my little sister Clara's hair when Mama was too tired. Every evening after work, he'd sit on our front porch, still wearing his work clothes, and watch the neighborhood kids play in the street. Or Raphael, he'd call me over sometimes, come sit with your old man. And I'd climb up next to him on the porch steps, and he'd put one of those big hands on my shoulder. You see all these children playing? Yes, sir. Each one of them got a story. Each one of them got dreams and fears and people who love them. You remember that when you grow up. Don't matter what color they are. Don't matter how much money they folks got. Everybody deserves to be treated with dignity. I carried those words with me when we moved north to Detroit in 1965. I was 17, and everything about that city was bigger, louder, and faster than anything I'd ever seen. The buildings stretched up so high they seemed to scratch the sky. And the factories ran 24 hours a day, belching smoke and opportunity in equal measure. I got my first job at Carter Manufacturing, making automotive parts. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was honest work, and it paid better than anything I could have imagined back in Alabama. I rented a little apartment in a neighborhood where the houses were close together, but the people looked out for each other, just like back home. That's where I met Jennifer. She was 22, fresh out of high school, with blonde hair that caught the sunlight and blue eyes that seemed to see right through you. She worked at the diner down the street from my apartment, and I'd go there every morning before my shift, ordering the same thing: 2 eggs over easy, wheat toast, and black coffee. "You sure are a creature of habit," she said one morning, refilling my coffee cup. "I like what I like," I said, and she smiled. "What else do you like, Raphael Winston?" She'd learned my name from writing it on my order tickets, and hearing her say it made something warm spread through my chest. "I like a woman who asks direct questions," I said, and this time her smile reached all the way to her eyes. We started talking every morning, and those 5-minute conversations turned into 10-minute ones, then 15. I learned that she was taking night classes to become a nurse, that her family had moved to Detroit from Ohio when she was 12, and that she had dreams of seeing the world beyond the diner and the neighborhood where we both lived. "I want to matter," she told me one evening when I walked her home from work. "I want to help people, make a difference." "You already matter," I said, and I meant it. Just being around her made me want to be better, work harder, dream bigger. We dated for 2 years before I asked her to marry me. I saved up for 6 months to buy her a ring, nothing fancy, just a simple gold band with a small diamond that caught the light when she moved her hands. I proposed on the same porch where my daddy had taught me about dignity and treating people right. "Jennifer Marie Campbell," I said, getting down on one knee, "will you do me the honor of being my wife?" She said yes, and we were married in a small ceremony at the Methodist church down the street. Her parents came, looking a little uncomfortable but trying to be polite. My family drove up from Alabama, Mama crying happy tears and Daddy shaking hands with everyone like he was running for mayor. "You take care of our boy," Mama told Jennifer at the reception, hugging her tight. "I will," Jennifer promised. And I believed her with every fiber of my being. The first years of our marriage were like something out of a dream I didn't know I was allowed to have. We moved into a little 2-bedroom house on Elm Street. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. Jennifer painted the kitchen yellow because she said it would make our mornings brighter, and she was right. Every day, I'd wake up to the smell of coffee and the sound of her humming while she got ready for her nursing classes. I was working steady at Carter Manufacturing, pulling in good money, and Jennifer was on track to graduate with a RN degree. We had plans, you know. We were going to save up for a bigger house, maybe start a family, take a vacation to Florida so she could see the ocean. "You ever been to the beach, Raphael?" She asked me one night as we lay in bed, her head on my chest. "Nope, closest I ever got was a muddy river back in Alabama." "I want to see the ocean with you. I want to feel that sand between my toes and watch the waves. Come in? Then we'll go," I said, running my fingers through her hair. "Soon as you finish school and we get some money saved up." She lifted her head and looked at me with those blue eyes. "You really mean that?" "Baby, I'd take you to the moon if I could figure out how to get there." She laughed and kissed me, and I felt like the richest man in Detroit. In 1972, Jennifer graduated nursing school, and I was so proud I thought I'd burst. I sat in that auditorium watching her walk across the stage, and when they called her name, I stood up and whooped so loud the people in front of me turned around and smiled. "That's my wife," I called out, not caring who heard me. "That's my brilliant, beautiful wife." Jennifer got a job at Detroit General Hospital, working the night shift in the emergency room. It was hard work, dangerous sometimes, but she loved it. She had come home in the mornings with stories about the people she'd helped: the little boy who'd fallen off his bike, the elderly woman who'd had a heart attack, the construction worker who'd cut his hand. "I made a difference today," she'd tell me, and her whole face would light up. "You make a difference every day," I'd say, and I meant it. In 1974, our daughter Rachel was born. 6 pounds, 4 ounces of pure miracle, with Jennifer's blue eyes and my stubborn chin. Holding her for the first time, I finally understood what my daddy meant about family being treasure. This little person, this perfect combination of me and the woman I loved, was worth more than all the money in the world. Jennifer was a natural mother. She'd sing to Rachel while she fed her, make up silly songs about diaper changes and bath time. I'd come home from work to find them both on the living room floor, Jennifer making faces while Rachel giggled and reached for her mama's nose. She said "dada" today, Jennifer told me one evening when Rachel was about 8 months old. She did not. She did. Rachel, tell daddy what you said. And I swear, that little girl looked right at me and said "dada." I nearly cried right there on the spot. 2 years later, we had our son Michael. He was bigger than Rachel had been, 8 pounds of future trouble. And from the moment he could crawl, he was into everything. Jennifer would find him in the kitchen cabinets, in the laundry basket, once even trying to climb into the refrigerator. "This boy is going to give us gray hair," she said, pulling him out from under the coffee table. "Good thing I love you both," I said, scooping Michael up and making him laugh. Our house was filled with noise and life and love. Saturday mornings, I'd make pancakes while Jennifer slept in, and the kids would help me by getting flour all over the kitchen. Sunday afternoons, we'd pile into our station wagon and drive to the park, where I'd push Rachel on the swings while Jennifer chased Michael around the playground. "We did good, didn't we?" Jennifer said one evening as we sat on our front porch, watching the kids play in the yard. "We did real good," I agreed, reaching over to take her hand. Those were the golden years, the ones I look back on now and wonder if I dreamed them. Jennifer and I were partners in everything. When Rachel needed help with her homework, we sit at the kitchen table together, me helping with math while Jennifer handled the English. When Michael got sick with the flu, we'd take turns staying up with him, bringing him soup and cool washcloths for his fever. Jennifer went back to work part-time when Michael started school, and I picked up overtime whenever I could. We were saving for that bigger house, planning for the kids' college educations, talking about retirement like it was something that might actually happen someday. "I want to travel when we're old," Jennifer told me one night. "I want to see Europe, maybe take a cruise." "Where do you want to go first?" "Ireland. I want to see where my great-grandmother came from." "Then we'll go to Ireland," I said, and I meant it. I'd have taken her anywhere she wanted to go. By the time the kids were teenagers, our little house on Elm Street felt like the center of the universe. Rachel was on the honor roll and planning to study medicine like her mama. Michael was playing football and talking about becoming an engineer. Jennifer had been promoted to head nurse in the ER, but I'd worked my way up to supervisor at the plant. We had barbecues in the backyard where the whole neighborhood would come over. Jennifer would make her famous potato salad and I'd man the grill, flipping burgers and hot dogs while everyone laughed and told stories. Those were the nights when I'd look around at all the people we'd gathered, all the lives we touched, and think, this is what happiness looks like. "You're a good man, Raffle Winston," Jennifer would whisper in my ear during those parties. And I'd pull her close and kiss her temple. "I'm good because you make me good," I'd whisper back. Looking back now, I think those might have been the truest words I ever spoke. The changes started small, so small I convinced myself I was imagining them. It was around 2010, when we'd been married for 38 years and I was 62. The kids were grown and living their own lives. Rachel was a doctor in Chicago, married to a lawyer named David, and Michael was an engineer in California with a wife named Sarah and twin boys who called me Grandpa Raffle. Jennifer had started making comments about other couples our age, couples who were retiring, traveling, living their best lives, as she put it. "Look at Tom and Linda," she'd say, pointing to our neighbors who'd just gotten back from a cruise to Alaska. "They're out there seeing the world while we're still stuck in the same routine we've had for 30 years. "We're not stuck," I'd say. "We're stable. There's a difference." So you give me this look like I was missing something obvious. Is there, though? I should have paid more attention to that look. The plant had been good to me over the years. I'd worked my way up from the floor to supervisor, and I was making decent money. Not rich man money, but enough to keep us comfortable, enough to help the kids when they needed it, enough to start thinking about retirement in a few years. But Jennifer started talking about money differently. Not gratefully, like we used to when we counted our blessings, but restlessly, like what we had wasn't enough. Patricia from work just bought a new car, she'd mentioned over dinner. A BMW. She says her husband's been saving up for it for 2 years. That's nice for Patricia. Don't you think it would be nice to have something new, something just for us? Our car was 7 years old but ran fine. Our house was paid off. We had money in savings and good health insurance. What more did we need? I think we're doing pretty well, baby, I'd say, and she'd nod, but I could see the dissatisfaction in her eyes. The first real warning sign came in 2012 when I was 64. I'd thrown my back out at work, nothing serious, just lifted wrong and felt something pull. I was laid up for about a week, and Jennifer had to help me with basic things. Getting dressed, getting in and out of bed, reaching things on high shelves. She did it, but not gracefully. There were sighs, heavy and dramatic. There were comments about how she'd been on her feet all day at the hospital, and now she had to come home and take care of me too. I'm not helpless, I told her one morning when she practically threw my coffee cup down on the nightstand. I can manage most things myself. Right, she said, but her tone suggested she didn't believe it. When I went back to work the following Monday, she seemed relieved in a way that made my stomach twist, like she'd been holding her breath for a week and could finally exhale. Glad to have your independence back, she asked, and I told myself she was just being supportive. But the way she said independence stuck with me, like it was something precious that could be lost. Around that same time, Jennifer started spending more time with her work friends, going out for drinks after her shifts, joining a book club that met on Saturday mornings. She'd always been social, but this felt different, more urgent, like she was trying to fill up her time so she wouldn't have to spend it with me. You could come, she'd offer sometimes, but in a way that made it clear she didn't really want me to. That's okay, I'd say. You enjoy yourself. And she would. She'd come home laughing about things her friends had said, stories from their lives that I wasn't part of. I started feeling like a spectator in my own marriage, watching my wife live a life that didn't really include me. The biggest warning sign came in 2015 when I was 67. My buddy Jerome from work had a heart attack and had to retire early on disability. Jennifer and I went to visit him and his wife Betty in the hospital. And afterward, Jennifer was quiet on the drive home. What are you thinking about? I asked. Betty, she said, did you see how tired she looked? How old? She's worried about Jerome. That's normal. She's going to spend the rest of her life taking care of him now. No more trips, no more freedom, just taking care of someone who can't take care of himself. The way she said it made my blood run cold, but I pushed the feeling down. That's what marriage is, I said, for better or worse in sickness and in health. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I wonder if people really know what they're promising when they say those words. Do you regret promising them? I don't know, she said, and my heart stopped beating for just a second. Do you ever think about what your life would have been like if you'd made different choices? Every day, I said, which was true. And every day, I'm grateful I chose you. She didn't say anything back. Looking back, I can see all the signs now, clear as highway markers. The way she started talking about retirement like it was a sentence instead of a reward. The way she'd look at couples our age who were dealing with health problems, shaking her head like they were cautionary tales. The way she started keeping her own bank account, just in case, she said, though she never explained what case she was preparing for. But at the time, I told myself these were just normal marriage adjustments. After almost 40 years together, of course we go through phases. Of course, we both wonder about the roads not taken. That's what long marriages do. They have seasons. And maybe we were just going through a winter before the spring came back. I was still thinking that way on November 15th, 2017, when I went to work for what would be the last time as a walking man. November 15th, 2017. Started like any other Tuesday. I woke up at 5:30 a.m., made coffee, and stood at our kitchen window watching the sunrise paint our backyard gold. Jennifer was working the night shift, so the house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the tick of the clock we'd bought for our 25th anniversary. I've been having some back pain for a few weeks, nothing too serious, just the kind of ache you get when you've been doing physical work for 45 years. At 69, I wasn't the young man who started at Carter Manufacturing, but I was still strong, still capable, still showing up every day to do my job. The plan was to work 2 more years and then retire. Jennifer and I have been talking about it more seriously lately, where we wanted to live, what we wanted to do with our time. She'd mentioned Florida again, said she was tired of Detroit winters. I'd started looking at little houses near the coast, places where we could sit on the porch and watch the ocean she'd always wanted to see. I got to the plant at 7 a.m., same as always, clocked in, grabbed my hard hat, and headed to the warehouse where they needed me to move some inventory. Nothing unusual about the job. We got a shipment of engine parts that needed to be relocated to the other side of the building. "Morning, Raph," called out Tony, one of the younger guys who'd been there about 5 years. "How's that back treating you?" "Same as always," I said, stretching a little. "Complaining, but still working. My dad says that's how you know you're getting old, when your body starts keeping score of all the hits you've taken." I laughed. "Your dad's a smart man." The forklift I was assigned was one of the older models, but it had been serviced recently and was running fine. I'd been operating machinery like this for decades. I could probably drive one of these things in my sleep. The load was standard too, about 2,000 pounds of parts stacked on pallets, nothing I hadn't moved 1,000 times before. Everything was going smoothly until I turned the corner near the loading dock. That's when I saw Jimmy Rodriguez, one of the new guys, walking directly into my path, looking at his phone instead of watching where he was going. I yanked the wheel hard to the right to avoid hitting him, and that's when everything went wrong. The load shifted, the forklift tipped, and 2,000 pounds of engine parts came crashing down on top of me. I remember the sound more than the pain at first. Metal screaming against concrete, parts scattering like deadly confetti, Jimmy shouting my name. Then came the pressure, enormous and crushing, pinning me to the ground like I was nothing more than a bug under a boot. The pain was indescribable. Have you ever had a tooth pulled without Novocaine? Imagine that feeling spreading through your entire lower body, but sharper, more urgent, like someone was driving railroad spikes through your spine. "Don't move him," someone shouted. "Call 911. Send you." I tried to speak, tried to tell them I was okay, but all that came out was a groan. I could taste blood in my mouth, and when I tried to move my legs, nothing happened. Nothing at all. That's when the real terror set in. Not the pain, not the chaos around me, but the absolute silence from the lower half of my body. It was like someone had drawn a line across my torso and erased everything below it. The paramedics arrived in what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. They asked me questions I couldn't focus on, poked me with things I couldn't feel, and loaded me onto a stretcher with a gentleness that scared me more than rough handling would have. "We're taking you to Detroit General," one of them said. "You're going to be okay." But his eyes said something different. The hospital was a blur of bright lights and urgent voices. Doctors and nurses I didn't recognize swarmed around me, ordering tests and x-rays and procedures with names I'd never heard. Someone must have called Jennifer, because she appeared at some point, still in her scrubs from the night shift, her face pale and drawn. "What happened?" she asked the doctor, not me. "The spinal cord injury," he said, and those 3 words changed everything. "The vertebrae were crushed. We're going to need to operate immediately." They wheeled me into surgery, and the last thing I remember before the anesthesia kicked in was Jennifer's face looking down at me, unreadable as a blank wall. I woke up 12 hours later to that buzzing fluorescent light and the news that would split my life in half. "The surgery went as well as we could have hoped," Dr. Matthews explained, "but the damage to your spinal cord is extensive. The crushed vertebrae severed several nerve pathways." "What does that mean?" I asked, though I already knew. "It means you won't regain the use of your legs, Mr. Winston. I'm sorry." The words hung in the air like smoke. Won't regain the use of your legs. Won't walk again. Won't stand up to hug your grandchildren or dance with your wife or climb the stairs to your own bedroom. Jennifer was sitting in the chair beside my bed, and I turned to look at her, expecting to see sympathy, sadness, maybe even determination. What I saw instead was something that made my chest tighten with a different kind of pain. Disgust and calculation. "How long will he be in the hospital?" she asked Dr. Matthews. 2 to 3 weeks for initial recovery, then he'll need extensive physical therapy and rehabilitation. The adjustment to life with paralysis is significant. You'll need modifications to your home, equipment, ongoing care. What kind of care? Initially help with basic daily activities. Bathing, dressing, transferring from bed to wheelchair. Many spouses find it challenging, but there are resources available. Home health aides, support groups, adaptive equipment. Jennifer nodded, but I could see her mind working, processing this information like a problem to be solved. That evening, after the doctor had left and nurses had checked on me for the 100th time, Jennifer and I were finally alone. I'd been waiting for this moment, hoping we could talk honestly about what came next, how we'd handle this challenge together. "Jen," I started, "I know this isn't what we planned." "No," she interrupted, her voice sharp. "It's not, but we'll figure it out. We've gotten through tough times before." She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot instead of at me. Those tough times didn't involve me becoming a full-time caregiver to someone who can't even go to the bathroom by himself. The words hit me like a physical blow. "Jennifer, do you have any idea what you're asking of me?" She turned around and her face was harder than I'd ever seen it. "I'm 58 years old, Rafa. I've worked my entire adult life, raised our children, taking care of everyone but myself. And now you want me to spend whatever years I have left changing your diapers and pushing you around in a wheelchair? I don't want anything from you that you don't want to give," I said quietly. "Good," she said, crossing her arms, "because I don't want to give this. I didn't sign up to be a nurse to my own husband. I married a man, not a patient." The fluorescent light buzzed louder, or maybe my hearing had gotten sharper along with the pain. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I won't do it. I won't be your caregiver. You'll have to figure out some other arrangement." I stared at her, this woman I'd loved for 44 years, this woman who'd promised to love me in sickness and in health, for better or worse. The woman who'd held our babies and comforted me when my parents died and celebrated every promotion and milestone with me. "Some other arrangement," I repeated. "There are facilities for people like you, nursing homes that specialize in spinal cord injuries. You could sell the house, use the money to pay for your care. People like me." "Don't make this harder than it has to be, Rafael. We both know this marriage has been over for years. We've just been going through the motions, this accident. Maybe it's a sign that it's time to be honest about what we both want." I felt something die inside my chest, something that had been alive for 44 years. "What do you want, Jennifer?" She lifted her chin, and for a moment she looked like the young nurse I fall in love with all those years ago. Except now, her eyes were cold as winter. "I want my life back. I want to travel, see the world, maybe even find someone who can give me the kind of partnership I deserve. I want to be more than just a caregiver counting down the days until I'm free." "And what about our vows? What about till death do us part?" "Death would have been kinder," she said. And those 5 words destroyed whatever was left of my heart. She left that night and didn't come back for 3 days. When she finally returned, it was with divorce papers and a real estate agent's business card. "I've already talked to a lawyer," she said, setting the papers on my hospital tray table like she was serving dinner. "We can split everything 50/50. The house will sell quickly. It's in a good neighborhood that should give you enough money for a decent care facility." I looked down at the papers, at my wife's signature already there at the bottom, and I realized that the woman I'd loved was gone. Maybe she'd been gone for years, and I'd just been too blind or too hopeful to see it. Just like that? I asked. Just like that, she confirmed. I'm sorry it happened this way, Raffle. I really am. But I'm not going to pretend this is something I can handle. She walked out of that hospital room, and I never saw her again as my wife. The next time our paths crossed, it would be at the lawyer's office, dividing up a lifetime like we were splitting the check at a restaurant. But that night, alone in that hospital bed with those papers on my chest and that fluorescent light buzzing overhead, I learned the hardest lesson of my life. Sometimes the person who promises to love you forever is the first one to walk away when forever gets difficult. The first month after Jennifer left was the darkest period of my life. And that's saying something for a man who grew up in Alabama in the 1950 Essen and worked in a factory for 45 years. At least when I was young and poor, I had hope. At least when work was hard, I could come home to someone who loved me. But lying in that hospital bed, paralyzed from the waist down and abandoned by the person I trusted most, I felt like I was drowning in quicksand. The nurses at Detroit General were kind, professional, but they couldn't hide the pity in their eyes when they came to check on me and found no visitors, no flowers, no cards from a loving wife. I'd catch them whispering at the nurses' station, and I knew they were talking about the man in room 314 whose wife had vanished like smoke. Mr. Winston, said Carol, one of the day shift nurses, who reminded me of my daughter Rachel, is there anyone else we can call for you? Family members who might want to know about your condition? I'd been dreading this conversation, but I knew I couldn't put it off forever. Rachel and Michael needed to know what had happened to their father, even though I wasn't sure how to explain that their mother had walked away from our family like it meant nothing. My daughter, I said finally, giving her Rachel's number in Chicago. Her name is Dr. Rachel Winston Hayes. Carol made the call from my room so I could talk to Rachel directly. Hearing my daughter's voice broke something loose in my chest that I'd been holding tight since the accident. Daddy, oh my God, what happened? Why didn't Mom call me? How do you tell your daughter that her mother has abandoned the family? How do you explain that the woman who raised her with love and care had looked at her father and seen nothing but a burden to be discarded? There's been some complications, baby girl, I said, and then I told her everything. The accident, the paralysis, the divorce papers, the real estate agent's card, all of it. Rachel was quiet for a long time after I finished. Then I heard her crying, soft and heartbroken, and it nearly destroyed me. I'm coming, she said. David and I are getting on a plane tonight. Don't you worry about anything, Daddy. Don't you worry about a single thing. She was there the next morning, my beautiful daughter with her mother's eyes, but thankfully none of her mother's coldness. She took one look at me lying in that hospital bed and burst into tears all over again. How could she do this, Rachel asked, holding my hand like she was afraid I might disappear too. How could Mom just leave? I don't know, baby. I honestly don't know. David, Rachel's husband, was a good man, quiet and steady like my own father had been. He didn't say much that first day, just stood behind Rachel with his hand on her shoulder, but I could see the anger burning in his eyes. Later, when Rachel went to get coffee, he leaned down close to my bed. My father-in-law is twice the man your ex-wife deserves, he said quietly. Don't you forget that. Michael flew in from California 2 days later with Sarah and the twins. My grandsons, Tyler and Mason, were 8 years old and didn't really understand why Grandpa couldn't get out of bed, but they climbed up carefully and showed me their school pictures and told me about their soccer team and made me laugh for the first time since the accident. Grandpa, are you going to get better? Tyler asked, tracing the outline of my hand with his small finger. I'm going to get different, I told him. But I'm still going to be your grandpa, and I'm still going to love you more than all the stars in the sky. Even if you can't play catch with us? Even then, we'll find new games to play. Mason, who was always the more serious of the two, looked at me with those big brown eyes. Is Grandma Jennifer coming to see you? The question hung in the air like a challenge. How do you explain betrayal to an 8-year-old? How do you tell a child that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you most are the ones who hurt you deepest? Grandma Jennifer is figuring some things out right now, I said carefully, but You don't need to worry about that. You just need to know that your family loves you and we're all going to be okay. Sarah, Michael's wife, was a social worker who specialized in helping families navigate crises. She took charge of the practical matters with the efficiency of someone who'd seen it all before. Within 2 days, she'd researched rehabilitation facilities, talked to insurance companies, and started the process of appealing the workers' compensation claim that Carter Manufacturing was trying to deny. They're saying you were operating the forklift improperly, she told me, reading from a stack of papers. That the accident was due to operator error, not equipment failure or unsafe working conditions. That's a lie, I said. I was avoiding hitting Jimmy Rodriguez. If I hadn't swerved, I would have killed that boy. We know that, and we're going to prove it. Jimmy already gave a statement supporting your version of events, and there are security cameras that recorded the whole thing. I'd worked for Carter Manufacturing for 45 years, giving them the best years of my life, and now they were trying to weasel out of taking care of me when I needed them most. It shouldn't have surprised me, but somehow it did. I guess I still had some faith left to lose. The rehabilitation hospital they transferred me to was a clean, modern facility about an hour outside Detroit. The staff was knowledgeable and kind, but the place felt like a warehouse for broken people. Men and women of all ages learning to navigate the world with wheelchairs, walkers, and prosthetic limbs. Some had been in car accidents, others had suffered strokes or fought wars. All of us were starting over in bodies that no longer worked the way they were supposed to. And my physical therapist was a woman named Amy, probably in her 30s, with arms like a weightlifter and the patience of a saint. She taught me how to transfer from bed to wheelchair, how to navigate curbs and doorways, how to reach things on high shelves and low shelves, and everything in between. The goal, she explained on my first day, is independence. We want you to be able to live on your own, take care of yourself, maybe even go back to work in some capacity. Work? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Lady, I'm 69 years old and paralyzed from the waist down. Nobody's going to hire me to do anything. You'd be surprised, she said. I've seen men older than you learn new skills, start new careers. The mind is still sharp, the hands still work. That's more than a lot of people have. She was right, of course, but it was hard to see past the mountain of obstacles in front of me. Everything I'd taken for granted for 69 years, walking, standing, climbing stairs, getting in and out of cars, was now a complex problem that required planning and equipment and sometimes help from other people. The loneliness was the worst part. Rachel and Michael visited as often as they could, but they had their own lives, their own families, their own responsibilities. Most evenings, I'd sit in my room watching TV shows I didn't care about, listening to the sounds of other patients talking to their families on the phone or receiving visitors who brought flowers and homemade cookies and stories from the outside world. I started talking to my houseplants. No joke. The rehabilitation center had a program where patients could tend small gardens as part of their therapy, and I'd signed up mostly because it gave me something to do with my hands. But sitting there in the greenhouse, watering a tomato plant and talking to it about the weather or the tiger's terrible season, I realized I hadn't had a real conversation with another adult in days. You're a good listener, I told that tomato plant. Better than most people, actually. You don't interrupt. You don't judge, and you don't walk away when things get difficult. One of the other patients, a woman named Betty who'd had a stroke at 72, overheard me and started laughing. I talked to my African violets, she said. My daughter thinks I'm losing my mind, but those flowers have heard more of my secrets than any therapist ever will. Betty became my first real friend in that place. She'd been married for 50 years when her husband died of cancer. And 6 months later, she'd had the stroke that brought her to the rehabilitation center. Like me, she was learning to live in a body that no longer obeyed her commands. But unlike me, she hadn't been abandoned by the person who promised to love her forever. At least Harold loved me until the end, she said one afternoon as we sat in the recreation room. I can't imagine what you're going through, having someone walk away like that. I keep thinking I must have done something wrong, I admitted. 44 years of marriage, and she left like I was nothing, like our whole life together was nothing. Some people, Betty said, only love you when it's convenient for them, when it's easy and pleasant and doesn't require any sacrifice. You didn't do anything wrong, Raphael. You just married someone who wasn't capable of real love. Then why did she stay for 44 years? Because for 44 years, you were useful to her. You provided for her, supported her dreams, gave her children and status and security. But the minute you needed something from her, the minute you became inconvenient, she showed you who she really was. Betty's words made sense, but they didn't make the pain any easier to bear. If anything, they made it worse because they meant that the woman I'd loved and trusted and built a life with had never really existed. The Jennifer I'd married was a fiction, a performance, a mask worn by someone who was fundamentally selfish and cold. The divorce was finalized while I was still in rehabilitation. Jennifer's lawyer had pushed for a quick settlement, probably hoping I'd be too overwhelmed to fight for my fair share. But Sarah had connected me with a good attorney, and we made sure I got what I was entitled to. Half the value of the house, half our savings, and a portion of Jennifer's pension from the hospital. It wasn't enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life, but it was enough to rent a small apartment and hire help when I needed it. More importantly, it was a recognition that I'd contributed something to our marriage, that my 45 years of work and love and faithfulness had value. The day the divorce was finalized, I called Rachel to let her know. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Free," I said, and I was surprised to realize I meant it. Sad, but free. "Have you heard from her at all?" "No. And I don't expect to." It was true. Jennifer had made it clear that she was done with me, with our family, with the life we'd built together. According to mutual friends, she'd started dating a retired accountant named Robert within 3 months of our divorce being finalized. They were planning to move to Florida together, to live in one of those retirement communities where everyone plays golf and pretends their past never happened. "I hope she's happy," I told Rachel, and I meant that too. Not because I forgave her, I wasn't there yet, but because carrying anger was too heavy a load for a man learning to live in a wheelchair. On my last night at the rehabilitation center, I sat in the garden with my tomato plant, which had grown tall and strong under my care. "I'm going to miss you," I told it, "but I think you'll do fine without me. You've got good roots, and you know how to reach for the light." As I said the words, I realized I was talking to myself as much as the plant. I had good roots too, family who loved me, friends who supported me, and decades of experience surviving difficult times. And maybe, just maybe, I still knew how to reach for the light. Moving into my new apartment was like starting life over at 70 years old. The place Sarah had found for me was in a complex specifically designed for people with disabilities. Wide doorways, roll-in showers, accessible kitchen counters, and an elevator that actually worked. It was small, just a 1-bedroom with a living room that opened onto a little balcony, but it was mine. "It's perfect, Daddy," Rachel said, helping me arrange my furniture on moving day. "And it's only 20 minutes from the VA hospital, in case you need anything." I'd qualified for some veterans benefit due to my 2 years of service in the Army back in the early 1970s. Nothing major, but enough to help with medical expenses and equipment. Every little bit helped when you're living on a fixed income and facing a lifetime of medical needs. The workers' compensation battle with Carter Manufacturing was still ongoing. They'd brought in a team of lawyers who were determined to prove that the accident was my fault, that 45 years of perfect safety record meant nothing compared to their desire to avoid paying my claim. "They're claiming you violated safety protocols," my lawyer Janet Morrison explained during one of our meetings. "They say you were operating the forklift at excessive speed and failed to maintain proper awareness of your surroundings." "That's garbage, and they know it," I said. "I was going maybe 5 miles per hour, and I was plenty aware of my surroundings. That's why I saw Jimmy Rodriguez in time to avoid hitting him." The security footage supports your version of events. Unfortunately, the quality isn't great, and their lawyers are arguing that it's inconclusive. The whole process was exhausting and demoralizing. Here I was, a man who'd given nearly half a century to a company, and they were fighting tooth and nail to avoid taking care of me when I needed them most. It felt like being betrayed all over again, except this time by an institution instead of a person. But I wasn't going to roll over and let them win. Too much was at stake, not just for me, but for every worker who might face the same situation in the future. I want to testify, I told Janet. I want to tell my side of the story in person. Are you sure? It's going to be intense. Their lawyers will try to discredit you, make you look careless or dishonest. Let them try. I've got nothing to hide and nothing to lose. They can't take away what's already gone. The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in March, almost 6 months after the accident. Rachel drove me to the courthouse, and I could see the stress on her face as she helped me transfer from the car to my wheelchair. "You don't have to do this," she said. "We could settle for what they're offering. It's not about the money, baby girl. It's about the truth." The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, with fluorescent lights that reminded me uncomfortably of that hospital room where Jennifer had destroyed my heart. Carter Manufacturing's legal team sat at one table, 3 lawyers in expensive suits who looked like they'd never spent a day doing actual work. Janet and I sat at the other table, and I could feel the weight of their stares as I rolled my wheelchair into position. When it was my turn to testify, Janet wheeled me to the witness stand and helped me position myself at the microphone. Looking out at the room, I saw familiar faces from the plant, guys I'd worked with for decades, who'd taken time off to support me. Tony was there, and Jimmy Rodriguez, whose life I'd probably saved by swerving that forklift. "Mr. Winston," Janet began, "can you tell us about your employment history with Carter Manufacturing?" I told him about starting there in 1970, working my way up from the floor to supervisor, never missing more than a day or two for illness in 45 years. I told them about the safety training I'd conducted, the awards I'd received, the commendations in my personnel file. "In your opinion, were you operating the forklift safely on the day of the accident?" "Absolutely. I was following all safety protocols. I was operating at an appropriate speed. I was aware of my surroundings, which is why I saw Mr. Rodriguez in time to avoid a collision." "What would have happened if you hadn't swerved?" "I would have killed him, no question. That boy was looking at his phone, not paying attention to where he was walking. If I'd hit him with 2,000 pounds of cargo, he'd be dead." Carter's lead attorney, a sharp-faced woman named Patricia Webb, cross-examined me with the kind of aggressive questioning you see in TV courtroom dramas. "Mr. Winston, isn't it true that you'd been experiencing back problems for several weeks before the accident?" "I'd had some minor aches and pains, yes, nothing that affected my ability to do my job." "Isn't it possible that these back problems impaired your judgment or reaction time?" "No, ma'am. My back was sore, not broken. I could still think clearly and operate machinery safely." "You're 69 years old, Mr. Winston. Isn't it possible that your reflexes aren't what they used to be?" I looked at her for a long moment, this woman who probably made more money in a month than I'd made in a year, trying to make me seem like a doddering old fool. "Ma'am, I've been operating heavy machinery longer than you've been alive. My reflexes were sharp enough to save Mr. Rodriguez's life. If they hadn't been, we'd be having a very different conversation right now." The hearing lasted 3 days. Jimmy Rodriguez testified about how I'd saved his life. My supervisor testified about my safety record. Even some of Carter's own employees testified that the forklift I'd been using had been acting up for weeks before the accident. In the end, the arbitrator ruled in my favor. Carter Manufacturing was ordered to pay my full workers' compensation claim, plus medical expenses, plus a penalty for trying to deny a legitimate claim. "It's a complete victory," Janet told me afterward. "You're going to be financially secure for the rest of your life." But sitting in that courthouse parking lot, I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired and empty, like I'd fought a war that nobody should have had to fight. The settlement money meant I could afford better medical care, a nicer apartment if I wanted one, maybe even travel a little. But what I really wanted was simpler and more impossible. I wanted my old life back. I wanted to be able to walk up the stairs to my bedroom. I wanted to dance with my wife at our grandchildren's weddings. I wanted to be the man I'd been before November 15th, 2017. Since I couldn't have any of that, I decided to focus on what I could have. I started volunteering at the rehabilitation center where I'd learned to live with paralysis. Twice a week, I'd roll my wheelchair into the rooms of newly injured patients and talk to them about what came next. I'm not going to lie to you. I'd tell them, this is going to be the hardest thing you've ever done. You're going to have days when you want to give up, when you can't see the point of fighting anymore. So why should I fight? Asked Marcus, a 35-year-old construction worker who'd fallen from scaffolding. Because giving up is easy, and you're not an easy man. Because your life isn't over, it's just different. And because there are people who need you to show them how to survive this. I also started speaking at safety training sessions for manufacturing companies. Janet had connected me with a consultant who specialized in workplace safety, and they hired me to tell my story to workers and supervisors. This could happen to any of you, I tell them, rolling my wheelchair to the front of the room. 1 second of inattention, one moment when safety protocols don't seem important, and your whole life changes. But you know what's worse than getting hurt? Letting your company convince you that it's your fault when it's not. The work gave me something I hadn't expected to find again: respect. These workers, these supervisors, these newly injured patients, they listened to me. They valued my experience and my wisdom. They saw me as more than just a man in a wheelchair. One evening, as I was leaving the rehabilitation center, after visiting with a young woman who'd been paralyzed in a diving accident, I ran into Dr. Matthews, the surgeon who'd operated on me after my accident. "Mr. Winston," he said, "I heard you've been volunteering here. How you doing?" "I'm doing well, Doc. Better than I expected, actually." I have to ask, how are things with your wife? The divorce was hard on you, I know. I considered the question seriously. How was I doing without Jennifer? How did it feel to be divorced after 44 years of marriage? "You know what, Doc? I'm at peace with it. I spent months being angry, feeling betrayed, wondering what I did wrong. But I finally realized that her leaving wasn't about me. It was about her. Some people only love you when it's convenient. And when it stops being convenient, they show you who they really are. That's a very mature perspective. It took me 70 years to get there," I laughed. "But better late than never." As I drove home that night, I thought about the man I'd been before the accident and the man I'd become after. The old Raphael had been strong and capable and loved. The new Raphael was something different. Scarred, maybe, but also wiser, more resilient, more aware of what really mattered. I'd lost the use of my legs and the love of my wife, but I'd gained something too. The knowledge that I could survive anything, that I was stronger than my worst day, that love might fail, but purpose could sustain you through the darkest nights. And that was enough. It had to be. 2 years after my accident, I was sitting on my apartment balcony watching the sunrise and thinking about something my grandmother used to say: "Baby, God never gives you more than you can handle, but sometimes he has a very high opinion of your capabilities." At 71, I was handling more than I'd ever imagined I could. Living independently in a wheelchair, managing my own finances and medical care, volunteering at the rehabilitation center, speaking at safety conferences, and somehow finding moments of genuine happiness in a life that looked nothing like what I'd planned. My phone rang, interrupting my morning coffee ritual. It was Rachel, calling from Chicago like she did every Tuesday morning. "How you feeling today, Daddy?" "Like a man who's grateful to be breathing," I said, which had become my standard answer. "How are my grandbabies?" "They're good. Emma's playing soccer now, and she wanted me to ask if you would come to one of her games." Emma was Rachel and David's daughter, born 2 years after my accident. She was the light of my life, a curious little girl who treated my wheelchair like it was the most normal thing in the world. "Of course I'll come. Wouldn't miss it." "Good, because there's something else I wanted to talk to you about." From her tone, I could tell this was serious. "What's on your mind, baby girl?" I've been thinking about what you went through with mom, and I need to say something. I was angry at her for a long time, angrier than I've ever been at anyone. But I realize now that I was also angry at myself. Why would you be angry at yourself? Because I didn't see it coming. None of us did. We all thought she was this loving, devoted wife and mother, and it turns out she was capable of abandoning her husband when he needed her most. How did we miss that? I'd wanted the same thing many times. How had I lived with someone for 44 years and not really known who she was? Rachel, your mother was loving and devoted for most of those years. People change. Sometimes they change slowly, and sometimes they change all at once when they're faced with a crisis. We can't blame ourselves for not predicting the future, but there must have been signs. There were. I can see them now, looking back, but at the time I explained them away because I wanted to believe the best about her. That's not a weakness, baby. That's love. Rachel was quiet for a moment. I keep worrying that I'll turn out like her, that when things get really hard, I'll discover I'm selfish and cruel too. You won't, I said with absolute certainty. You want to know how I know? And because you're here. Because you call me every Tuesday morning and drive 5 hours to watch your daughter's soccer games with your old man. Because when I was lying in that hospital bed, broken and abandoned, you got on a plane and came to me. Your mother's daughter would have found an excuse to stay in Chicago. I heard her crying softly on the other end of the line. Hey, Rachel, listen to me. We all have the capacity for selfishness, but we also have the capacity for love and sacrifice and loyalty. Every day we choose which part of ourselves to feed. Your mother fed her selfishness for so long that it consumed everything else. You feed your love, and that's why you're the woman you are. After we hung up, I sat on that balcony thinking about choices and character and the lessons I'd learned since my world fell apart. The first lesson was about trust. I'd always been someone who trusted easily, who gave people the benefit of the doubt, who believed that love was enough to overcome any obstacle. The betrayal taught me to be more careful with my trust, but it didn't teach me to stop trusting altogether. The difference now was that I trusted based on evidence, not hope. Betty from the rehabilitation center had become a close friend and eventually something more. We've been dating for about a year, taking things slow because we both learned that promises can be broken and love can be conditional. But what we had was real, built on shared experience, mutual respect, and the knowledge that we'd both survive abandonment and come out stronger. I love you, she told me one evening as we sat in her garden, but I also like you. I like who you are when things are difficult. I like how you treat people who can't do anything for you. I like that you're still kind even though you have every reason to be bitter. That was the second lesson, the difference between loving someone and liking them. I'd loved Jennifer for 44 years, but I realized now that I hadn't liked her very much toward the end. She'd become someone who complained constantly, who was never satisfied, who treated service workers badly and gossiped about her friends. I'd made excuses for those behaviors because I loved her, but love without like is just habit wearing a pretty mask. The third lesson was about purpose. For most of my adult life, my purpose had been providing for my family and being a good husband and father. When Jennifer left and the kids were grown, I thought my purpose was over. But I discovered that purpose isn't something you find, it's something you create. Every week, I spoke to newly injured patients who were convinced their lives were over. I told them about the 35-year-old woman who became a Paralympic athlete after losing her legs in Afghanistan. I told them about the 60-year-old man who'd started a nonprofit to help other spinal cord injury patients after his own accident. I told them about me, learning to live and love and laugh again at 71. Your life isn't over, I tell them. It's just the beginning, a new chapter, and you get to decide what kind of story it becomes. The fourth lesson was about forgiveness, not the kind of forgiveness that excuses bad behavior or pretends betrayal doesn't matter, but the kind that frees you from carrying someone else's poison in your heart. I forgave Jennifer not because she deserved it, but because I deserved peace. I forgave her for being weak when I needed her to be strong, for being selfish when I needed her to be generous, for breaking promises that should have been sacred. I forgave her because holding on to that anger was like drinking poison and expecting her to get sick. But forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It didn't mean pretending our marriage had been something other than what it was. It didn't mean I trust her again or welcome her back into my life. It just meant I was done letting her past choices control my future happiness. The fifth and most important lesson was about resilience. We think of resilience as bouncing back, returning to the way things were before tragedy struck. But real resilience isn't about going back. It's about going forward. It's about building something new from the pieces of what was broken. I couldn't go back to being the man who walked and trusted blindly and believed that love was always enough. But I could become something better. A man who rode and trusted wisely and believed that he was enough, with or without someone else's love. If you hear nothing else from me, remember this. I told a group of safety supervisors at a conference in Toledo. The measure of a man isn't what happens to him. It's what he does with what happens to him. You can't control the forklift that tips over, or the spouse who walks away, or the company that tries to deny your claim, but you can control your response. You can choose courage over fear, purpose over self-pity, growth over bitterness. And if you discover that someone you love was never really capable of loving you back, don't let that make you afraid to love again. Let it make you wiser about who deserves your love and more grateful for those who prove themselves worthy of it. On my 72nd birthday, Betty threw me a small party in her apartment. Rachel and her family drove in from Chicago. Michael flew in from California with his wife and boys, and a few friends from the rehabilitation center came by to celebrate. As I looked around the room at all these people who'd chosen to be part of my life, who'd stuck with me through the hardest times, who loved me not for what I could do for them, but for who I was, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: complete contentment. "What are you thinking about?" Betty asked, sitting down beside my wheelchair. "I'm thinking that I'm the luckiest man in the world," I said. "Even after everything you've been through?" "Especially after everything I've been through. The accident showed me who I really am underneath all the titles and roles. The divorce showed me the difference between people who love you and people who use you. The recovery showed me that I'm stronger than I ever imagined. And now I know that happiness isn't about having the life you plan. It's about making the most of the life you've got." As the evening wound down and everyone said their goodbyes, Rachel pulled me aside. "Daddy, I need to tell you something. I used to feel sorry for you after the accident and the divorce. I thought your life was ruined, that you'd never be happy again. And now I think you might be happier than you've ever been. You're more yourself than I've ever seen you, stronger, wiser, more at peace. I'm proud to be your daughter." That night, as I got ready for bed in my accessible apartment, surrounded by pictures of family and friends who'd proven their love through action rather than words, I thought about my grandmother's saying one more time. God never gives you more than you can handle, but sometimes he has a very high opinion of your capabilities. Maybe she was right. Maybe losing everything I thought I needed was the only way to discover everything I actually had. Maybe being broken was the first step toward becoming whole. All I knew for certain was this: I was 72 years old, paralyzed from the waist down, divorced after 44 years of marriage, and happier than I'd been in decades. If that wasn't proof of resilience, I didn't know what was. This morning, I woke up the same way I have every morning for the past 5 years, transferring from my bed to my wheelchair, rolling to the kitchen to make coffee, and sitting on my balcony to watch the sun come up over Detroit. It's become my ritual, my meditation, my daily reminder that I survived another night and have another day to make something meaningful. Betty and I are getting married next month. Nothing fancy, just a small ceremony in her garden with our children and grandchildren as witnesses. At our age, after everything we've both been through, we're not interested in elaborate celebrations. We just want to promise each other what we've already proven: that we'll be there for each other, especially when being there is difficult. Why get married at all? Michael asked when I told him our plans. You're both independent, financially secure, happy with the way things are. What's the point of making it official? Because promises matter, I told him. Your mother broke her promises to me, and it nearly destroyed my faith in love. But Betty and I making new promises to each other, promises we intend to keep, feels like healing. Rachel understood immediately. It's not about the wedding, she said. It's about choosing each other publicly, in front of the people who matter most. Exactly. I still volunteer at the rehabilitation center every Tuesday and Thursday. Last week, I talked to a 28-year-old teacher named Ashley who'd been paralyzed in a car accident. She was angry, bitter, convinced her life was over. I was supposed to get married in 3 months, she told me, crying. My fiance says he still wants to go through with it, but how can I ask him to tie himself to someone who can't even walk down the aisle? Can I tell you something? I said, rolling my chair closer to her bed. The person who's meant to be your partner will see you, not your wheelchair. They'll see your strength, your courage, your beautiful heart. And if your fiance can't see those things, then he was never the right person for you anyway. How do you know? Because someone left me when I needed them most, and someone else found me when I was ready to love again. The person who leaves wasn't really yours to begin with. The person who stays, who chooses you when choosing you is hard, that's your person. She got married 6 months later. Her fiance, a man named James, had spent those months learning about spinal cord injuries, modifying their apartment, and proving every day that he was exactly the right person for her. I was honored to be invited to their wedding, and I cried happy tears when he kissed her in her beautiful white dress as she sat in her wheelchair, both of them glowing with joy. I think about Jennifer sometimes, but not with anger anymore. According to mutual friends, she and Robert lasted about 2 years before she left him for someone else with more money and fewer health problems. She's on her 3rd relationship since our divorce, still searching for something she'll never find because she doesn't understand what she's looking for. I hope she finds peace someday, not because I want her back in my life, but because carrying that much selfishness and fear must be exhausting. I hope she learns what I learned, that love isn't about finding someone perfect, it's about choosing to see someone completely and love them anyway. My grandchildren call me Wheels now, a nickname that started as a joke and became a term of endearment. Tyler and Mason, who are 13 now, fight over who gets to ride on the back of my wheelchair when we go to the park. Emma, Rachel's daughter, decorates my spokes with colorful ribbons and calls me the fastest grandpa in Chicago. Wheels, she said last week when I was visiting, are you sad that you can't walk? Sometimes, I told her honestly, but I'm not sad about who I am now. Good, she said, climbing onto my lap, because you're perfect just the way you are. Out of the mouths of babes. Next week, I'm speaking at a conference for healthcare workers about how to support families dealing with sudden disability. I'll tell them what I wish someone had told me in that hospital room 5 years ago. That crisis reveals character, both in the patient and in the people around them. Some people will surprise you with their strength and loyalty. Others will disappoint you with their weakness and abandonment. Both reactions say nothing about you and everything about them. I'll tell them that healing isn't about returning to who you were before. It's about becoming who you're meant to be after. That resilience isn't about being unbreakable. It's about learning how to rebuild from the pieces. Most importantly, I'll tell them that being broken doesn't make you worthless. Sometimes it makes you wise. As I finish my coffee and get ready to start another day, I think about the quote that started this story. A man's character is revealed not by what he does when he's strong, but by how he treats others when they're weak. Jennifer's character was revealed when I became weak and she chose cruelty over compassion, abandonment over loyalty. But my character was revealed too, in how I chose to respond to that cruelty. I could have become bitter, closed off, afraid to trust or love again. Instead, I chose growth, purpose, and eventually new love. In the end, that might be the most important lesson of all. We don't get to choose what happens to us, but we always get to choose who we become because of it. If this story hit home, I want you to know something. You're stronger than your worst day, braver than your biggest fear, and worthy of love even when someone who promised to love you forever decides you're not. Don't let their failure to see your worth make you forget it. Share your own experience in the comments if you feel moved to do so. Tell a brother who needs to hear he's not alone. And remember, we rise above together. This is His Stories, where men find the courage to tell their truth and the strength to rewrite their endings. The sun is fully up now, painting my balcony golden with morning light. Time to roll forward into another day of this beautiful, difficult, perfectly imperfect life I've built from the ashes of the one I lost. And you know what? I wouldn't trade it for anything.